his business failed, what she didn't realise is that she was also nominated as the director of the business. Are you really going to say, hey, I don't believe you, can you show me the documents? And if you don't know what you're signing, are you really going to say, well, maybe I'm going to call my own lawyer? You just don't do that. There's other ways that we can address it, but you just don't do that in a relationship. So it becomes easy to manipulate that situation.
Welcome to the Money Matters podcast. This is PJ Patterson, founder of Intrepid Wealth. Today, I am joined by Melissa Cuturich, who is an advocate, a diva. Her business, Diva Financial, is all about empowering women, but empowering people in general, I think.
Yeah.
You are an author. You have several books, but the one that's in front of me is The Heart of Hope, which is not a book that I have yet read, but I have read something off the back cover, and I think this is a great way to start this interview. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of a section on the back of the book, because I think this probably tells us a lot about what we're going to learn today from Melissa in terms of financial coercion, and particularly coercion against women, which I know is a topic that you are very passionate about. We're going to learn more about that today. But this is from the back of Melissa's book, The Heart of Hope. Abandoned by her parents, married at 16, and soon after diagnosed with a brain tumor, Melissa faced constant physical and verbal abuse from her husband. The following year, she became pregnant with the first of her 3 children. Her home became a prison, never being allowed to go out on her own or have her own money. She became frightful and judged by strangers, and with little education, knew little about the outside world. To read more, you'll have to pick up the book, which I assume you can buy at any retailer, online and so forth, The Heart of Hope. I read that paragraph, and I think just as I am now, was speechless. So tell us about Melissa and how you arrived at where you are today. Where do you want to begin?
First of all, I did not think that you were going to introduce me by the book, but anyway, okay. Basically, when my life started, it was definitely not who I am and where I am now. So a lot of the industry, many people in the industry still do not know anything about my background. When I became a single parent with 3 children, it was very clear that I knew nothing about the world. So it was a lot of trial and error, and I basically fell into construction, problem solving, insolvency, restructure, and then in 2008, I had my own fight against one of our larger banks, and hence that was 2008 was when we were starting to look at the global financial crisis and so on and so on. And that is when I learned, self-taught, everything there was to know about banking codes, regulations, what my rights were. I turned to all the free resources and regulators and so many what I call mazes of information, and realised that it was so convoluted and it didn't suit what my situation was.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, a lot of self-education and dealing with various lawyers and representatives of the bank and areas which was so terrifying, unfamiliar,
Mm-hmm.
and there was no one out there that could really help.
So what drove you to have to do that?
Oh my God.
That's okay. We'll just keep going whenever you're ready.
If we look at, so you want me to give you a bit of my background?
If
it
you're
all
comfortable
started?
with that. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's an interesting question, and that is, you've kind of set the table there, and I think anyone that will listen to this is going to be going, oh, well, what was it that you needed to do all of that? Because that sounds pretty involved.
Yes. So, like I said, finding myself as a single parent. I remember leaving the police station and having a social worker take me to an area which terrified me. And let's just say I was very unconventional. I still am, to a degree. Found a very compassionate real estate agent that rang a landlord. We started with nothing. And from there, I built myself up. Found myself back into a space which was familiar, which was the construction industry. And that's where it all began. So at the time, I guess, and this is a difficult thing for me, PJ, it's because I can't relate to the woman that I was then. I really, really can't. And as we speak now, I'm actually recording the book in an audio and I'm thinking, wow, it's really not me. So I was fortunate enough to trial and error my whole life through and build a life and a future for my kids and me. Something so unfamiliar. And bought my home, first home, in 2003. Bought an investment property because of my dealings with insolvency and understanding how it worked. Got an investment property in 2007. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. No hiccups, no defaults, no nothing. Everything was fine. Except I got a letter and a demand from the bank that my facility had expired. And so with the facility being expired, it was refinance yourself out in 28 days and we want you out of the bank. We're not basically looking for that kind of risk. So when they don't have an appetite for your facility or for that debt any longer, that's what happened, and I received a demand and default and everything all at once, and the offer of a deed of forbearance. And at that time, I had 3 children.
What were their ages?
At that time, it was 16, 14, and 9. Mm-hmm. And basically what had occurred was I found myself back where I was. And it's that same old thing, like I say to many women now when we go through this process. All those triggers, emotional triggers came up and I was in panic mode and felt helpless and all that yada yada stuff. Anyway, I did not have any support, in a sense of did not realise that I could get a lawyer or an accountant or someone to come with me at these wonderful meetings that they set up for you. And went in myself to be placed in a room full of, no disrespect, men in suits and giving me ultimatums. Even though my documents actually said one thing, they were adamant that I was defaulted and they wanted me out. Lo and behold, GFC occurred. I did not do the norm, did not sign a deed of forbearance because they are not compulsory, not mandatory that you have to. And basically fought them off and saved my home and investment and everything else. And long story short, I found myself doing the same for a lot of people that were in distress and in that fear mode. That's why I ended up doing what I do.
And we're going to talk about that today as well. I want to just touch on a couple of key things that you said there and maybe deep dive into that a bit more if we could. The feeling of panic and helplessness, would that be something that's pretty common and still going on these days in the industry, in the finance industry? Definitely it is. And so when did you actually start your business to help with that? I don't imagine it would have been immediately after that, but how soon after that whole experience did you start doing?
So basically, my whole life, from the age of 30, I've always worked for myself. I decided that what I was doing in the construction space was basically problem solving anyway. I then found that during that whole process, what was really what was at the forefront of many situations that, say, companies found themselves in was that the women really did not know the severity of a situation. So I guess it sort of all morphed into more advocacy for women and education for women to understand the logistics, the legislation, their actual obligation to what they were signing and what they had been involved in. In 2015, it sort of all morphed into just specifically that. But from 2006, I've pretty much been a consultant and advocate in this space, more so for the construction industry and various other industries.
When you say the construction industry, can you elaborate on that? What exactly were you doing?
Once upon a time, I actually worked on the tools.
Oh.
Yes, as a steel fixer. It was wonderful. Not. But basically, I was a project manager and would go in to resolve difficulties when it came to cash flow, debt collection, contractual matters, dissolving of partnerships, and a lot of the hidden matters that aren't very evident until it all turns. You know what I was going to say now, didn't you? Yep.
Taboo.
Yep. So when it goes bad, that's when everything comes out. Mm-hmm. But it was more the fact that you really needed the prevention, and that's where I would be called in a lot of the times before it got to the problem where you had no option but to call administrators.
Mm-hmm. And were you helping the construction company because you worked for them?
Yes.
Okay. Helping them get out of trouble and avoid the pitfalls and restructure and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, did a lot of securities of payment implementation when that came in. Wage disputes with the CMFU, and there's too much to list, to be honest.
Those are two pretty big things, and I guess I'm getting the sense that you were, and still are, a bit of a fixer.
So much so, yes.
Yeah. And so when you started Diva Financial, that was around 2015?
So Diva Enterprise International began in 2015, and it comprises of various areas. Diva Academy, which is the educational space, Diva Advocacy, and Diva Financial came to life in 2020, really, when it was really clear that we needed a brokerage space for women to understand what they were signing, what it all meant. It was more so for, there you go, this is going to be long-winded. When it all occurred that there were various areas that were lacking, especially for single mums, I found that very, very clear. Single mums had always had a hard time, even if they had ample assets, security, they had these hurdles they would still have to jump over. A lot of explanation and stuff. And I found that with the previous work, my previous experience, after fixing everything, as you say, everyone needed that restructure. So back in the day, I was not a broker, but we would put together a sustainable solution, various different options, and put them forward directly to the bank or the lenders. Now, in my life, I've experienced a lot of hardship when it comes to private lending. A lot of developers getting into the private lending space, not really understanding it, and then having the hard time of trying to get into a more conventional lend. Laziness too. But that's where it all began, when it came to understanding, okay, the next part of this business would be brokerage.
Mm-hmm.
So that they had a place that they could obtain finance that is suitable, finance that they can sustain with or without a partner,
Mm-hmm.
and say even for when the partner isn't working any longer or life just happens. That was 2021. 2021 is when I became the broker. Not wanting.
Let's circle back to the whole idea of financial and economic abuse. This is something that has now gotten elevated, I think, in the legislative circles. The government's certainly talking about it. I know you're contributing to that conversation. Tell us how you are doing that at the moment. What have you done around that whole piece? Because you're going to Canberra soon.
Okay. Oh my God. You have really put me on the spot here. Everything I've been through and everything a lot of people have experienced has all been around financial coercion. And the difficulty is that there's no clear framework around the current, legislation that has now been implemented. It started in 1st July 2024. The definition of financial coercion is basically the manipulation of it. Manipulation and imbalance of power. What has been very clear since the legislation, a lot of people have used it and also weaponized it to a degree. Earlier today, after a lengthy discussion with a member in Canberra, it was decided that whilst we've been informing and providing practical role play when it comes to frontline services, especially now in DV, but what I found, PJ, is that in the professional space, we have an even bigger responsibility when it comes to financial coercion. Only because it can be, as I said, weaponized. So, as an example, you may have a couple that come to you. There's a perpetrator there, and he will basically tell you and give you all the bells and whistles. You go ahead, you get the facility, have the funds approved. It doesn't go bad until they separate and they're in court and there's certain things that have come out.
Well, to the point, though, and you're right. I mean, it can be either or, but let's face it.
There's a lot more women.
A high percentage of the time,
it's women.
It's a female that's
100%.
Not being informed really, truly about what's going on.
100%.
Yeah.
So, in this case, she has then gone out. She's left the relationship. She's been asked several questions, and the list of questions that they ask you.
Who's they?
See,
the court, family court?
Yes. So the social workers, or you can have court advocates that do the same, but lawyers as well. Mm-hmm. So first things first is they'll go through and they'll ask you a series of questions, and if you tick several of them, it's financial coercion. It is something that, and I say it's a two-pronged effect because it can happen in any relationship, and innocently it can happen as well, where the partner doesn't realise by them taking control of everything or being the person that makes the decisions and everything else that he may not involve the partner because she just doesn't really want to deal with that side of things. And I say to every woman, you need to. So you get this done. She will make the claim of financial coercion. He's then pressured by lawyers and so on and so on. But the easiest thing for any perpetrator to do is to blame the professional. And this is where I say that you can't be lackadaisical when it comes to, it's in our compliance anyway. It really is. Whilst a lot of professionals have said, well, it's really got nothing to do with us, it actually has. So the perpetrator can then come back and say that he was innocent in this whole thing, you were the one, they were both in front of you, so on and so on. And at the end of the day, the victim is the one that suffers, because they have to gather the evidence. They have to show the intent. Please tell me, how do you show intent? I don't know what your intentions are, seriously. And you don't know mine either. It's something that, how am I supposed to show what you're intending on doing, what your agenda is? That is the difficulty a lot of women are facing.
Let's unpack that for a second. There's a whole lot there, both for the public, for the professional as well. And I mean, we've talked a lot about this. I've known you for a little bit over a year now. Luckily we sat next to each other at a gala dinner and had a great conversation about this. Got you into the Independent Finance Brokers Forum to speak and to educate the profession on this. It had my eyes open, and I've been in this profession for over 20 years and hadn't ever really thought about this. So let's go back to the individual and let's put a little bit more context, and even maybe use an example of a woman who is being financially coerced and may not actually realize it. Give me an example of that. Let's use an example where maybe it isn't a relationship breakdown or something like that. Let's just say married couple, and in your example there, where maybe, typically our society is defined by traditional roles. Women often are staying at home, looking after kids, raising family, doing those things, and the men go out and work. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but that's oftentimes what happens.
It's general.
And the woman might say to the husband, look, you're in charge of the money and doing those things. You earn it, you look after the bills, and I'm going to look after the family, the house, raising the kids, and doing those, those things. So you're in charge of that. I'm in charge of this.
I have many of them.
Pretty typical example, I would think. Yeah? Okay.
So
then how would she potentially be being coerced? Maybe they don't even realize it. Run me through an example there, because I think this will be interesting. Most people listening to this will probably not have thought about what you're about to say.
Well, I have a woman. She was in her 60s, and she had been married they'd been together for over 40 years. And what had occurred is that they had separated. Now they were going through the process of family court and everything else. And during that time, when there was the financial disclosure, the interesting thing was that she had no idea. She wasn't even on title. She had spent all her life raising kids, looking after everything, while her husband got the career, got the status. And when it came to it, the hardest part of this was the emotional awareness of it. When you asked her the questions of, where are your title deeds, where are your statements, and everything else that she was meant to provide, she was stunned because she couldn't move. She had received an allowance, thinking that was just normal. She received an allowance on a credit card. Never questioned anything at all. What had happened then, it also opened her eyes that she never was involved in anything. She ran the household. Sounds like it doesn't happen these days, but it happens a lot. She ran the household, had money to spend on what she needed for the kids and herself, but had nothing else. Everything was managed by her partner, the family trust, and everything that was structured. She was excluded. She wasn't even on title of the property where they lived. And it sounds really bizarre. You'd think surely she would know. couldn't be possible. It actually was, because it was one of those things that whenever they bought properties or whatever happened, he made all the decisions. He would tell her what was going on. He would show her. But what happens behind the doors of various facilities and organisations is totally different. She never questioned. That happens to a lot of women. They don't question it. They don't ask the right questions. And even when they do suspect or they feel like they're not being told everything, they still believe the partner. They don't have that in them to actually ring up the bank, ring up the organisation, call the lawyer, keep people accountable, get them to explain. The difficulty and the sadness in this situation was when you hear the explanation, you hear the story, and you hear the love and the dedication she had, where she feels like her whole life has been betrayed. And they seem to have a really good, normal, healthy relationship. So that happens a lot. You another example?
Absolutely. If you have another one.
Another example is when a woman who was quite educated, very professional, she had been married for a substantially long time. She was the one that earned a lot more money in the relationship, and he had managed to obtain finance like normal. They got the home loan and everything else, but he was actually getting more finance for his business as well, and she was a guarantor. His business failed. What she didn't realise is that she was also nominated as the director of the business well before it actually went into administration. She had no idea. So she faced not only the administrators, the investigations, and so on and so on. She found herself doubting her own abilities because she was a professional. She had no idea of the amount of documentation that she didn't have access to and now really needed because she was the director. So that one in itself was difficult. But these things happen a lot where women just they're oblivious to it. Are you really going to say, hey, I don't believe you, can you show me the documents? And if you don't know what you're signing, are you really going to say, well, maybe I'm going to call my own lawyer? You just don't do that. There's other ways that we can address it, but you just don't do that in a relationship. So it becomes easy to manipulate that situation. And it happens to men too, but in these cases, it was women that were so unsuspecting. And this had nothing to do with domestic violence in a sense of, I'm going to take that back, I retract that. It is abuse. However, in this case, there was no violence. There was no evidence of anything going wrong, which unfortunately our system has always, if there's no bruising, it's not a problem.
What you said just now is so deep and powerful, and hopefully this message will get out to a wide audience, particularly of women, that will listen to it and may begin to question, what have I actually signed for my partner or in my relationship? Because what I've noticed, and I've thought back professionally across the last 20 years in the couples that I've helped with businesses or even buying property or whatever, and I've thought, where have there been situations where maybe, the wife has come along at the behest of the husband, she's involved in the dealing, just to sign things and sit there quietly and sign where she needs to sign and so forth. And the male is the one driving the transaction. You can see that. And not even thinking about, does she actually know what's going on? Should I take her aside and say, hey, do you understand, what's going on? Do you need me to explain anything? Would you like to get your own advice? that sort of thing. And I dare say, having heard stories that you've told, have been talking to you about this now for the better part of a year, and myself realizing that this is a very serious problem. Like, this is really a serious problem, particularly for women, because, and it's not because of ignorance or anything else. It's just, for whatever reason, our society probably has a, and I'm on the pulpit here. This is an interview of you, not of me, but the reality is this needs to be said. Like, women can, should, and should do their own due diligence on transactions, and they should ask their partners to explain what's going on. And if they're uncomfortable ever at any point, they should go and get their own independent legal advice. And I'm going to say, and this is probably politically incorrect, but if your partner kicks up a stink about it, there's probably something wrong.
Yes, 100%. So if you aren't free, or if you aren't, that's even a worse word, you should be free and able to make decisions and choices. The difficulty is a lot of the time that a partner, if he kicks up a stink, say, he starts using all the emotional tools that you can get, makes you feel guilty for even questioning or raising, how can you doubt me? Don't you love me? Don't you trust me? If you loved me, you would support me. All of those wonderful statements, as I call triggers. A lot of the time, a woman won't realize that. So we have a thing that we go through, which is life, love, identity, finance, emotion. So you look at the love, the situation, the relationship. Who are you being? If you don't love yourself, you cannot love your partner. Now, women have been, it's just in our DNA. We are the nurturers. We have always been, I hate the word discriminated, but we have always been treated less than or powerless when it comes to life in general. And here's something else for you. Unless someone is going to take every legislation out there, shred it, and rewrite it instead of adding to it, to band-aid whatever is going on for the next generation and the next generation, we are always going to be in that imbalance of power. And that is a sad truth. But in love, we forget ourselves a lot. So it's easy to then deal with the emotions. The emotions of making a person feel guilty for asking the question, making a person feel less than, making a woman feel, well, your duty is to stand by me, protect me, support me, because I'm the breadwinner. I put the roof over your head. I give you these extra luxuries. Oh, try do it yourself. I had a woman that said to me once that, oh, he's a good man, he doesn't hit me. It's not about being hit. The words that this man used, the things that he implied, and the way he managed to diminish her opinions, her intellect, her instinct, was just cruel. And all of these affect the way and the person you are, which is your identity. Women don't protect our identity. We think we sign a document, but we forget that that signature holds so much power. Because if you sign something, you are responsible. As a professional, though, who explains that to you? It's just a matter of sign here, sign here, sign here, and the partner is the one that puts the emotional pressure on them. not to ask, even when your instinct is saying something's not right, something, I don't know what I'm signing, but at the same time I don't want to act stupid or don't want to feel stupid, and I don't want to overstep. I had a woman say I didn't want to demasculate him. How does that work? Didn't want to ask questions in front of him, so I didn't demasculate him. It's up to the professional to understand that you're dealing with finance here. And there's no coming back from what you sign there. It's very, very hard to then turn around and say, well, I didn't know what I was signing. Well, you did it in front of a professional, so therefore you did know. So many women fall into that trap where they will sign a document. It'll be in front of a professional, lawyer, whoever. It'll be in front of a professional person, and that is deemed as validation that they knew what they were signing. So yes, the professional should be able to take her away, separate them, because you need both of them to understand. You don't just tick it off and say, yep, they understood, I explained it. You can't do that. Every single time a woman has asked and said to me that she did ask questions, she ended up being more confused than anything else. The emotional barrage of words and fears and even subtle threats of, if I ask him this, he's going to, I don't know, not give me the allowance that I need to run the household. A lot of women have been entrapped when it comes to money, so they don't ask. Or they don't ask the right people. So yes, there is a warning, but it's overridden by emotions, by love, by the relationship itself.
So what's the way out of this? What are some tips, some advice you would give to women, young and old, in relationship, not in relationship, to even at a base level, be on the lookout for, deal with this sort of stuff in their life? Because it's going to happen.
Oh, there is. Yeah, 100%. And I think the more that we can get women, girls, starting from a very young age, get women to actually keep copies of documents. And I hate saying this again, take responsibility for your life, for your identity, for your person, for your character, for your reputation, for your future. It's not about till death do us part. It's till debt do us part, really. But by taking copies of all your documents, by asking for copies as well, it's not just a matter of, here, the first applicant being the husband, he's got the copy of or he gets a copy, he should get a copy of the facility. Get your own copy as well. Or if not, these days, scan it, keep it in your phone. Get copies of titles. Understand that all of these things matter. And if you don't know something, pick up the phone and ask. Every single lender has an area which is confidential and you can ask those questions. There are various resources out there as well. We've put a couple out as well, which is just a checklist of all the documents that you really, really need to have, what you need to store, and the questions you need to ask various professionals. Because if you can't ask in front of your partner, ask afterwards. Don't sign things you don't know. It's not a bad thing. And if you sign something, or if you don't want to sign, if you can't sign something and your partner is kicking up a stink, I'd be really looking at your relationship, because that's your future, your responsibility, your obligation as well. It's not just a matter of signing it and then he'll deal with it. we find a lot of people that have separated, and obviously the first applicant is the main one. The partner has then stopped making payments to the mortgage, used that to create the default, where then the bank has gone after the woman because she's on the loan too. And he's just simply stopped. There are also all sorts of reasons and emotions behind this kind of action, but at this point, what she has signed, she has then given the bank or the lender the rights to exercise. Well, I said that wrong. Exercise their rights. You know what I'm trying to say. But exercise their rights and then take possession. But they'll take it out on a woman that has not had the same ability, that has relinquished her choices to, or her ability to earn money, to have some sort of asset behind her or support behind her. That's the way they're using, or I say weaponizing, finance. But that happens a lot. And sometimes it's more retaliation than anything else.
That is a huge topic and issue. And it's been going on for years.
Yeah, I did warn you, didn't I? I said this is going to be like, where do we begin? Where do we end?
Well, I suppose, I don't know if you want to call it light at the end of the tunnel, but there was a change in legislation that came into effect on, was it?
1st of July.
July of 2024. Got to remember what year we're in. And what did that, what is the significance of that legislative change? Tell us what changed.
You did have to ask me that, because I'm going to say that it's only now recognised that financial coercion is a crime. That's the only thing I see that's changed.
So the things that we've been talking about,
is
these
a crime.
Situations now that men in particular are putting women into, is now a crime punishable by
law and jail sentence as well, if the victim is able to show intent. That's basically it in a nutshell.
Are you aware of any court cases that have already happened?
There's a number that's being currently. There's a number of them, but there's been there has been no real prosecution.
Well, I suppose it's early days. It's only been about 6 months since that legislation changed, and I'm sure that we'll see more, because it happens a lot.
We will see more. We're already seeing that the likes of Africa are suffocating in complaints. There are more complaints now than ever. Told you I'm not politically correct today. There are so many institutions, banks, that are creating or setting up. This is how we support DV. This is how we support financial coercion and women in situations. That to me is really, really hard, only because it's not a matter of the after effect. It's not a matter of, here, you'll have $5,000 to start over. It's more than that, because this coercion can be detected in our institutions, but it's camouflaged and concealed by documentation, and it's not looked at properly. Can I share another example with you?
Please do.
Okay. So, more recently, there was a woman that had been involved with a partner that she had met second time around. She had say, we'll give her a figure, 100,000 from a divorce settlement. She had met this person. They had moved in together. He couldn't obtain funding from his bank, had a home loan, and he basically used every line there is to say, well, you've got a really good ability. You can get a loan online. I really need your help. And all the promises and everything else. So an online application was made. And even though she was reluctant and she asked several questions, she still did it. She got a conditional approval. She got that conditional approval. They had to go into the bank, provide documentation and the other bits and pieces that they needed. He had defaults. She paid out those defaults because that was one of the conditions. They had their standard, the interview and everything else. The loan goes through. They received an extra X amount of money. Not long after that loan goes through, he starts spending. She came to me through word of mouth. We called the bank. She did not. This was the interesting thing. She was so confident when we were speaking, but when the banker was speaking to her and asking certain questions, she felt intimidated and quiet and stupid because she did the application online. And so just asking those basic questions, well, you applied for it, that statement, you applied for it. Why did you apply for it? She applied for it because her partner got her to apply for it. Her partner had the defaults. Her partner needed to refinance out of another bank. He couldn't get the loan. So she gets the loan, the bank approve it, the excess funds he starts spending. They then tell her and transfer her to the section of DV, stress, hardship.
And DV is domestic violence.
Domestic violence, sorry. So domestic violence, the whole financial coercion came up. They offered her $5,000 to move so she could move out of the home. No one really listened. I was on the call with her. And so I then suggested we go back to the banker that actually approved this facility. What had happened then was it was very, very clear that that kind of advice or support that they're offering isn't going to do anything. The solution here was that the woman actually banked with the bank. So the funds that were remaining were transferred into her personal account before we called the bank to let the bank know that this is what was really going on. The funds were there, the bank could see. And it was proven then, after we went through the whole exercise, that she was not responsible. She wasn't on title. So during that, when the documents have to be shown into the bank and to get approved and so on, he was the only one on title. Why wasn't that raised? It wasn't raised because he jumped in beforehand and said, we're in the process. This happens a lot. And if it wasn't for that intervention or understanding that she has these extra rights, normal rights actually, not extra rights, they're normal. They're what everyone would have. She would still be lumbered with a debt, a home loan facility that she could only pay because he stopped working. What is this whole situation though? Once the loan was approved, he actually called the police on her. She was trespassing because she wasn't on title. These things happen.
Wow.
But for a professional to just simply accept the word of the person that actually needs the loan to say we're in the process of it, she had no idea. And she couldn't say a word because he actually was a very aggressive man.
Mm-hmm. Where can people, and women specifically, get help for situations like this if they find themselves in a situation like this? Where should they go to get assistance?
Well, the first thing is the 1-800-RESPECT. Give them a call. Definitely.
I haven't heard of that number. Who is that?
1-800-RESPECT is an organisation that is specifically there for women that are leaving violent situations or hostile situations. So they have a raft of services and areas that they can refer you to and assist you with.
Great. What else? Yeah, say call you. I know you want to say it. I'm going to say it. They should call you. Probably once it's a little bit further advanced, I would say, right? Because you tend to be more of you step in, unfortunately, once things are known and things are kind of well down the path, unfortunately.
What we do a lot of is actually help a number of various lawyers as well when it comes to this kind of situation. But no, we have now set up an area that will provide women, especially, just the basic checklist and understanding of what they can do, even templates to say, these are the things these are the documents, this is what I need. Because the legislation has come through, it's very, very difficult for women to get a hold sometimes of the details they need because they're not given, they're not provided. We've found a lot of situations where even documents that were provided, there are so many elements of inconsistency there that if you aren't looking for it, you won't see it and it all appears legitimate. So there are various areas and we have so many different, which I will share with you the resources, but we have various areas that we can all turn to. And then you've also got your financial counselling, which is a free service. Sometimes, however, you all need to sit back and look at your situation to understand what you are going through and not necessarily what's being told to you. That's where I find that, and there you go, I'll base this on myself. It wasn't until I found myself in the real world and having so many people give me advice and tell me what I should be doing and where I could turn to, that I became so overwhelmed and not know what was right, what was wrong, what was left, what was right. It wasn't until I could sit back and really say, well, this is what I need. This is what is right for me and my kids. Mm. Not necessarily it's a one-size-fits-all. So, yes, there are resources, and I always say the most important resource is yourself. Just getting that belief that you can ask the questions. You can go to a professional and simply say, I'm not knowing what I'm signing. I don't know what this means. Not feeling stupid, even if you are an accountant. It's just about, and having that professional, this is where I go back to professionals, having that professional know that at the end of the day, you're not dealing with one person, you're dealing with two. And while you're never going to know what that person's agenda is, you have an obligation, because you are basically tying her up as well in that facility. The hard part of all of this, PJ, is the fact that you can't undo what is signed. and you will have a hell of a time trying to make any professional see that I really don't and didn't have a choice.
So the best thing to do is to have an ounce of prevention before you have, what's the second part of that statement, but to spend the time up front to make sure that you are aware of, comfortable with, understand everything you're about to do before you do it.
100%. A lot of the times, and this is the thing, not wanting to undo what our systems have done and the wonderful services that are out there, but coming from a space of understanding that particular scenario and that circumstance. If I had known, or if I just spent time with myself before I was bombarded with all this overwhelming information, it would have made my life a lot easier. And we don't get a chance to do that. Survival is a cocktail of emotions, restrictions, and doubt.
Well, on that note, we've been talking now for about an hour around financial coercion. I know, it just flies by. I'm going to wrap this up by saying, first of all, thank you so much for sharing a bit about your background, your personal life with us, and your journey. Clearly, there's more to unpack there. The message to anyone listening to this who now may feel like you need to go and do some research on what you've signed and maybe what your partner has gotten you into, I will ensure that there are resource links on this podcast page. You can go to Diva Financial, look them up on Google. The resource should be there on the website somewhere. And if you do have any issues or questions and you're unsure, you can reach out to the 1-800-RESPECT. I presume there are other services, perhaps Lifeline and some of those others out there would probably help. And certainly if they didn't know, they probably know where to point you. If the situation is just dire and you're not sure, reach out to Intrepid Wealth, reach out to Diva Financial. There are people that will help you, that want to help you solve your problems. Please do that. And again, Melissa, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you for the experience, especially.
Oh, we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Thanks a lot for listening to the Money Matters podcast. I'm PJ Patterson, your host, founder and director of Intrepid Wealth. It's been great to have you with us.